This is Show Up as a Leader, a show from People Forward Network, helping you maximize your positive impact on the world by becoming your best, fully authentic self. Hey, everyone. I really appreciated this conversation that I got to have with Jeff Fortner. He is the clinical and HR director at Indiana Internal Medicine Consultants. And we really just had a great conversation about going back to the basics. I think so often we can over engineer and overcomplicate formal and informal leadership. And he just has some really good, simple practices that helps him slow down. He uses his tool to help reinforce the practices he wants to have. And the whole premise is really this idea of how do we balance vulnerability and authenticity with developing accountable people and teams. So again, I just think there's a lot of richness sometimes in simplicity and going back to the basics, and Jeff is definitely a great model of that, and I think you'll hopefully get some really good reminders and refreshers out of this conversation. All right, Jeff, I am really excited to have this conversation with you because we do a lot of work in a lot of industries, but we do a lot of work in healthcare. And we just know that, let's just be honest, healthcare has suffered tremendously over the past several years. And we keep hearing about compassion fatigue and healthcare workers being on the receiving end of really poor and sometimes even abusive behavior and just stress and burning out. And just, they're at an all-time high. And what I know, regardless of industry, is that part of what contributes to some of this all-time stress and burnout and even people acting out in ways that aren't helpful is that people aren't feeling seen and cared for in their own struggles. And so I know that you're doing a lot of really great work to help people feel seen and cared for in spite of these challenging environments at Indiana Internal Medicine Consultants. So talk to us about what you're doing that's kind of bucking this trend, if you will, to help people thrive in this really, really challenging space right now.
Yeah, thanks, Rosie. As you mentioned in the past few years, which it's hard to believe, when we say that, it was many years ago, right, that COVID kind of presented and kind of changed the landscape of healthcare as we knew it back then, right? And so I think a lot of what we're trying to do now is just make sure that our employees are being heard and taken care of. We're focused obviously always on taking care of the patient and being there present 100% when the patient's in front of us. But, in order to take care of our patients, we got to make sure that our employees are in that right mindset. And so, just getting out there and talking to them, as myself as a leader, it's just about being myself and being transparent with them, getting out and talking to them about their weekend or, what events do they have going on as we're delivering the message and the vision of the company. So I think that's, really important about just being out there in front of your employees and being available for them.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and I think so many people, as our to-do lists grow, they lose sight of that simple, like, connect with them, like, know them on a personal level. It's one of Pat Lencioni's remedies for the causes of job misery is anonymity. Like, people aren't known, aren't seen. And so how do you build in the time where it's done in an authentic way? It's not check the box. Jeff is going around check the box. I'm supposed to ask you about your weekend or whatever,
Yeah.
right? Because that's how it can turn into. Like, how have you built deliberate practices beyond yourself too, to really take the time to check in with their employees as people first?
You don't necessarily want them to understand like that I might have it on my calendar, just as a gentle reminder for myself, right? Because as you said, there's so many things to do and you can kind of get wrapped up in those things. And so, you have to be intentional. And so for myself personally, I work a lot off of my calendar. And so just that gentle reminder, that I got to get up, I got to get out there and go walk around. And so I think, and I struggle with this sometimes too personally, is just slowing down in that walk, right? Like slowing down, and it's got to be more than just, hey, hello, how you doing? And just continue to keep on walking, but slowing down and, hey, team, how's it going? Like, what's going on? Anything that I can help with today? What's the big concern? Those types of conversations, And it might be a couple minutes that you're over there, and it could be, 10, 15 minutes, kind of depending on what they present to you at that time. And then I think, to pull in your other leaders and stuff, sometimes I've just stopped by their office first and said, hey, come on, let's go take a walk. Like, let's just go take a walk, see how the team's doing. Let's do a quick check-in. And so just by myself kind of modeling those behaviors, hopefully, they'll kind of pick up that behavior as well and kind of make that part of their, routine and part of being the leader that we're looking for.
Well, I love that. And I mean, I was half joking about on your calendar, but what I do like is when you say, you use your tools, because I live and die by my calendar. And if it's not in my calendar, it's going to get missed. And so even when it comes to like authentic recognition, when I have leaders that tend to get more task focused than people focused, I encourage them, if they're a calendar person, because not everybody is, but okay, I don't care if it's Friday or Monday, pick a day of the week, Wednesday, it's random, but pick a day that you have an appointment that you're not going to ignore. That is, find an authentic reason to recognize people, or it's like lifting up your head to see people around you and go, oh, you know what? I haven't recognized that person, and I have a good reason to. They worked really hard, or they helped out, or they're embodying the values, right? They don't always have to go above and beyond. And so I do think there's something to be said for knowing how we work best, using our tools as reminders to, and I love that you're even like people going, grabbing them like, hey, let's go, because they may not have a practice, whether it's in their calendar or a tickler that pops up or something. So part of it is just trying to build habits and build deliberate practices until it becomes second nature. And even when it becomes second nature, we all need reminders.
I mean, there's always things that pop up during the day too, right? Like that could just be an easy email or pick up the phone and call. But if you just take that extra 5 seconds or whatever, or however long it might be, right? And you get up from your desk and you go walk out and just make that face-to-face contact with that individual, right? And you're going to impact them as well as the other people within that area or department, if you will.
You know what just that brought up for me is one of my previous guests that I had on, about a year and a half ago. Her name is Jen Marr, and she's the founder of a company called Inspiring Comfort. And we bring her work also. We are a deliverer of her programs into organizations. But she's done some phenomenal research and has found that most people, when you survey them, say, oh yeah, I feel like I can see other people when they're struggling. Like I'm pretty empathetic. I'm pretty good at recognizing that. About 80% of people will say that, but almost the same percentage say, but I don't feel seen when I struggle. And I also am maybe not as transparent with others or sharing when I am, but I wish I could be. So we have this like predicament because we are so heads down on our work, on our tasks, that we don't, or in our phones for that matter, we literally don't lift our head up to look to see other people around us. And so it's just brought that up for me of, if we just start picking our heads up and looking around us, right? Get out of our office or get out of our cubicle or get out of our heads down and with our patient or whatever, right? Whether you're physically in an office or not, it's that getting up and looking. And so like you said, it could be also an email or a text message. So there's a challenge we do in one of those programs. It's a 3x3x3. Every day, pick 3 people, take 3 minutes and check in on them. And it could be just a, hey, was thinking about you, how you're doing, whatever. And you start to realize it boosts us as much as the other person. So anyway, that's what brought that up for me. I'm like, yeah, there's something to be said for having deliberate practices and bringing that human piece that I think from a formal leadership standpoint, people they forget because we do get so heads down and all this other stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so then with that, there's another practice that you and I talked about when we were prepping for this conversation that I think is an important conversation we need to have, because what we have found in our work, obviously I train with Brene Brown. We talk a lot about her research and that our future demands that we have braver leaders and courageous cultures, and that really requires us to model vulnerability and to lean into that discomfort that inherently comes with vulnerability. And what we see a lot with the groups that we support is in trying to help them recognize how to lean into vulnerability, then they immediately go to, yeah, but if I do that, I'm not holding people accountable or I'm not fostering accountability. They think of it as a either or sometimes, when really it's a both and. And so I want to talk to you and have you share, like, how do you find that balance between both, being vulnerable and authentic and also developing accountable people and teams?
A lot of times just creating that relationship. So starting at the beginning, right? Like, great example is, this morning, it's Monday. And so we've had a few new hires start. And So within like the first 30 minutes of them being part of our team, like I'm walking in, I'm greeting them, introducing myself, just talking to them about the weekend and telling them about, my position and kind of where my office is and those types of things, just right from the beginning, building that relationship with them. So obviously as you're out there and interacting with folks, you're able to kind of continue those conversations. But then on the flip side, when we do have those situations where, we do have to hold people accountable, those tough conversations, right? You've kind of already built that relationship with them. You've kind of shown them that, hey, I'm an individual. I'm telling you about who I am. I might talk to you about the weekend and stuff, but I'm also going to be here and support you in whatever situation you might be in. If we have a performance issue, I'm going to address it and I'm going to hold you accountable. But I'm also, maybe 5 minutes later, going to come just have a general conversation with you because that's who I am, right? We're all people, we're all individuals. From time to time, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to talk about it, hold you accountable. We're going to coach you through that situation, and then we're going to move on, right? And so I think that's the biggest part, at least from my perspective, is just that they understand, like, we are going to have those tough conversations from time to time, but, here to support you and help you through those situations.
Well, I love it. Really, what you're describing is reminds me of Kim Scott's radical candor model of care personally, challenge directly. Like if you've taken the time to build a relationship and know somebody on a personal level, then when you have growth feedback to give them, when there are accountability type conversations, it feels probably less like shaming or like parental type of accountability. It's like, oh, this person actually cares about me and is willing to be clear and direct with me and give me this feedback. And it's going to hopefully be perceived more as a gift. But when we don't have that relationship, it tends to go sideways, don't you think?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think, over time, as I've kind of learned, right, like, very common in those tougher conversations to say, look, like, this is no fun for me. It's no fun for you. Nobody really wants to be in these types of conversations, but it's my responsibility as a leader to hold you accountable and stuff. And, when we get done with the conversation, I'm ready to be done talking about it. And, I'm not going to continue to revisit over and over. And I think that just kind of helps them kind of relax a little bit. I think they understand the seriousness of the situation, whatever might be presenting at that time, but then they kind of understand where I'm at with it also.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you can be both genuine and caring and have standards and, enforce policies and, create accountability. So I love that. I'm curious, what do you find like with the leaders? So that's for yourself, with the leaders within your organization, how do you find they are with this balance of vulnerability and authenticity with accountability, or like where are the areas that they struggle with, or what are the practices they've adopted that help make this practice more broad throughout your organization?
Yeah, I think, there's definitely some that, go into the conversation, maybe a newer leader that's just uncomfortable with having those tough conversations and, maybe they're fearful of the reaction of the employee. Are they going to be angry? Are they going to, be emotional in whatever fashion? And so just kind of helping them through that process. A lot of times for me, just in coaching them through it, right, is, well, hey, come in here with me. Let's walk through this conversation together. But I think, for a lot of them, it's just, again, kind of walking through those exercises and stuff. And so, I think that's part of the good part in being in healthcare, right? Like, because we're focused so much on patient care, it's part of what we live and breathe, right? And so trying to help them understand that, treat them as a patient, right? Like just have those conversations with them and break it down to where they're able to understand and stuff. So.
Well, and like any other industry, for people who are listening that are in healthcare, it's the customer or whatnot. It's the reason why we have an organization or business to begin with, because you wouldn't have it right without the patient or the customer. But one of the things that you said in the beginning that I love, that I think is so important to come back to, is so often, and I hear this in healthcare, well, the patient first, or I hear this in other industries, customer first. But the reality is, as you put it out, but your employees are the ones that are servicing the customer, that are servicing the patient. And if they don't feel seen as a human being and valued as a human being, if they feel like they're just a number, if they're in a environment that is lacking in psychological safety and there's a lot of shame, if they're in an environment that is not courageous, if they're not getting feedback, if they don't know what's expected of them, how in the world do you think that they're going to effectively fill in the blank, care for this patient, care for this process, care for this customer? And I think, one of the things that keeps coming up for me as you're talking that I appreciate is this stuff isn't rocket science. Like it's about going back to the basics that I think we can overcomplicate and over-engineer just how to show up as a decent human being. And oh, by the way, if you happen to have a formal leadership role, like there is an additional level of intention you have to put simply because of the influence you have. But I think we can over-engineer stuff where it's not helpful, where you're like, hey, like put a reminder in your calendar, get up and go talk to people. When people start at an organization, get to know them because it makes it easier to have a feedback conversation. Like, I don't know, I think that's brilliant. It's so simple and it's so brilliant because I think we get away from the basics and think we have to go, I don't know, on some tangent that it's not that hard. It's just, we need to take time and intention, don't you think?
Yeah. And I think I mentioned at the beginning just about being transparent, right? Just be who you are, right? Show up as yourself, right? I mean, I know we hear that a lot out there, and I like to have fun and joke around, and maybe some dry sense of humor or whatever. And I'm going to relay that to the team and stuff, and just let them know who I am, and joke around. A few years ago, I had an opportunity to present some HR topics at a large conference with a bunch of managers, and it was in Chicago. Hundreds of people out there in the audience, and just happened to be right about NHL playoff season time. And so there were some Blackhawk fans in Chicago. And so, I'm going to get out there, and I think Chicago had lost the night before. So I was going to go out and make some comment. I don't remember who they were playing now, but made some comment about the Blackhawks losing. I mentioned it to some of my teammates that I was going to make the comment, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, Jeff, don't do that. Like, the crowd's going to turn on you." I'm like, hey, it is what it is. Let's just go out there and have a good time. And so, I told myself, nope, I'm not going to do it. They told me I shouldn't, but then I just kind of let it ride. I was myself and just kind of let it go. And of course, I got some grumbles out there, of course, but it was all fun, right? Like kept them engaged. I let them know who I was, and it was a good conversation overall. And so it's just what I try to do myself, but also just convey to the people that are working with me, fellow leaders and stuff. Be who you are. Like, if you're trying to go out there and put on a show and try to be somebody that you're not, it is not going to come across very well. People aren't going to respect you and your roles. And so, there's a time and place, right? And so you have to know where the balance is. And again, I've got, the Pacers logo just right above my shoulder here. So, I can make some comments about the Pacers and that type of stuff. But, it is what it is. That's what we do. Just have fun with it.
Well, I love it. There's a saying that says, well, you might as well be you because everybody else is taken, right?
Exactly.
But I think that's true, right. Because, and I think so often people feel like, oh, I'm going, for example, and I've been asked to do a presentation or public speak, and I'm supposed to like put on a performance versus connect with the audience and be real. But it can also be inside like one person or a team, right? I'm supposed to be a leader, a supervisor, a manager, director, and therefore that means fill in the blank. I'm supposed to have it all together, or I'm supposed to show up a certain way. And you're right. Like people's BS meter is pretty good. And I always say that most people want realness and authenticity over polish and perfection any day of the week. But there's a fear that some people have of, oh, but if they see the flawed me, they're going to fill in the blank, not respect me, or they're going to figure out I'm an imposter and don't know what I'm talking about and shouldn't be here. Or, we have a lot. We're finishing up a study that we're looking at the most common ones, but it happens way more than we think. So I'm curious for you, what has helped you get to the point where you're comfortable being you and, being authentic and saying, hey, this is me?
I think for me, as you talk about, putting on a performance, putting on a show and stuff, doing all of that, like creates so much stress on me as an individual. Like, oh my gosh, I got to make sure that my shirt's straight and like that I say all the right things and, all those types of things. And, just going out and being yourself is so much easier than trying to prepare and, make a bunch of notes. And now, don't get me wrong, right? Like if I'm going to go out there and do a presentation or get up in front of the team and, present it at the last holiday party and that type of stuff, I'm going to have my notes, my bullet points of things that I need to touch on, right? But again, if you're putting all this stress on yourself, working up a lot of anxiety and stuff, like the message is probably not going to come out very clear, right? Like because you're so focused on all those aspects there. So I think that's really, it has taken time, right? Like, 20 years or whatever that I've kind of been doing this. And um, it's not something that just naturally happened, right? And so through the course of time, just understanding like it goes so much easier, so much better to just be myself, just be authentic, and the message is just going to come out so much better and be respected more.
Well, I love that. And even when you were talking earlier about having to have some of those difficult conversations of just being real and saying, this isn't fun for me, or this is hard for me, or this is new for me, or whatever it is to like set the stage. It also humanizes you to people when you're having, it's that balance again of the accountability, but also that authenticity and vulnerability that I think sometimes, especially again, I'm going to say people who are in a formal leadership role can create a narrative that, oh, I'm supposed to have it all figured out. It's like, no, just tell people, look, I'm working at getting better at feedback, or I'm working at getting better on expectations, or I'm working at getting better at delegating. So bear with me. Most people are going to lean in and give you grace rather than sit in judgment when you just let yourself be new.
Absolutely. I think, we also have to give the team the platform to be able to provide that feedback, right? Like, there's so many different avenues right now. Like we launched a new HRIS a few months ago. And so there's a community social media type of platform and surveys and that type of stuff. And I mean, it's not for everybody, right? But it's another way for them to be able to go out and provide some feedback. And, if they don't feel comfortable saying stuff, straight to you, right? Like they might feel more comfortable that just having that avenue to be able to anonymously report and provide that feedback. So.
Yeah. Well, and then the key is right that as organizational leaders, we circle back to that feedback because so often that stuff ends up in a dead hole. I know one of our clients, they do quarterly pulse surveys, but then like the result, either the results are not communicated back to people or it's not transparent that, oh, leadership actually is looking at the results and here's what they're doing with it. And so it creates a narrative for people because we always say in the absence of data, our brains filled in with story. People start creating a narrative of what's the point? They don't do anything with it. They don't listen to it where they actually are. They're just not closing that loop of, no, we actually are. Like they just assume people would know that, oh, we made this change because we got your feedback. Like, no, you have to very obtusely create that connection for people for sure.
Yes. You gotta be intentional with it. Yeah. If you're gonna open up that survey or that, feedback form or whatever it might be, like that's gotta be part of your action plan. If my survey closes on the 20th, what's my step from there? It's going to be review the results and provide that data back to the team and action items from there.
Well, and that's also another piece of creating psychological safety because I think when you are showing up authentic as yourself, when you are asking for feedback and modeling that you can receive feedback yourself or through a survey mechanism like you have with your HRIS platform, and we create a space where people feel like, oh, they can speak up, or I can share an idea, I can admit I made a mistake, I can ask for help. Like that is so huge in any organization, but I will say especially healthcare, we talk so much about patient safety, but you're not going to have any of that if your employees don't have psychological safety. And so I love that you're creating that for your teams and modeling that and trying to help your leaders with that. That's huge. Well, so speaking of being authentic, and what one of the things that I have learned, as I've alluded to, is that no matter how much work we do on ourselves, we are kind of as a species hardwired for self-protection, and we can tell ourselves pretty limiting stories that keep us safe, but can keep us small and keep us from making progress on our goals. And so one of the things in the spirit of authenticity, Jeff, that I would love if you'd be willing to share is what is a self-limiting story that you still tell yourself sometimes? And when it shows up or rears its head, how do you move beyond it so that you can still show up as a leader in your life?
Yeah, I think, over the past couple of years, I've kind of transitioned into a new role in healthcare. And so, majority of my experience is in HR. And so I've taken on an additional role from a clinical standpoint. I have no clinical background, right? And so that's been one of my things that I've kind of had to work through was, from an operational standpoint, I can help get things, moving in the right direction. But understanding, how to do vitals or something simple as that, right? That our team is doing that, is kind of a common skill set for them, right? It's not for me. And so that challenges, myself with, well, what do I know type of questions, right? And so I think it's just, again, getting out there in front of the team and telling them, hey, guys, I've never done this before. Walk me through this process. What is it that's causing you delay, concerns? What do we need to modify? Get out there and shadow and understand what they're working through, stepping back and just watching and listening to what concerns they have. And then from there, figuring out what is it that I can do to kind of help them work through the daily operations. And so that's just something that I've kind of had to work on. Honestly, it's, been the last year and a half, whatever, that I've kind of have to work through those things and me kind of talking myself out of it, right? Like I said, from an HR standpoint, I'm good. Yes, I have things to learn and I learn every day, but that's my comfort zone, right? And that's where I kind of want to be. And so you just kind of force myself to get out there and to ask those questions and take their feedback and trust the knowledge that they have, right? They're doing it day in and day out, and some have been doing it for 20 and 30 years or more, right? And so just trusting their skills and knowledge.
There's so much in that I love for many reasons. I mean, one is that nobody can be an expert on anything. So going in with that learner mindset and the people who are closest to the work and doing it day in, day out, really being more that advocate of how can I add value? How can I support you? How can I remove a barrier? That's a different skill set than needing to know the ins and outs of everything they do. I mean, I think about on my team, I couldn't tell you the ins and outs of what they do every single day. I know that the work gets done and I know the vision and I know what needs to happen, but I trust that they have the experience. But it's, hey, is there something that I need to be, a conduit to help reduce a barrier or something that need to figure out, whether it's from a budget standpoint or from a tool standpoint or whatever. And I think so often, and I even hear this with some employees who are like, well, I can't believe they put so-and-so as a leadership. They don't know anything about what we do. Well, leadership, as you know, is a very different skill set than the individual roles. And so, but I love that you're out like trying to learn and be that conduit. And like, hey, I'm not here to tell you how to do your job. I'm not here to take over. I'm here to understand. And I'm here to kind of, and so I would say kudos to that, because many people could get sucked into imposter syndrome and be like, I don't know what I'm talking about. What did they do? Why am I here? They're going to figure me out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I love it. It's a growth opportunity, though. Anytime you get to be out of your comfort zone. So I love that you're getting that to get out of your HR comfort zone. All right. Are you ready for quick questions?
Sure.
All right. He's like, uh-oh, let's go. All right. Fill in the blank. Living authentically is
Being yourself, just getting out there and telling folks who you are and not putting up a front, somebody else, just be who you are.
absolutely. That's like a mic drop moment right there. All right. When the world is presenting an opening, but you don't feel like showing up as a leader, what do you do?
You show up. You just show up, right? You psych yourself up, you get an extra cup of coffee, and you go in and you be who you're supposed to be, right? You go in there and you set the example, you be the leader, and, use the people that are around you to kind of help you work through whatever thoughts or hesitations that you might have.
I love it. Reinforcements with caffeine and people around you. Awesome. Here we go.
That's
Okay.
right. Yep.
What is something people would be surprised to know about you?
Well, I have a large family of 5 kids. 3 of my kids are adopted. My oldest son is from Guatemala, and I have another son and daughter that are from Bulgaria, and so large family.
I love that. You have a multicultural, multinational family. That's awesome.
Yes.
That's fantastic. Yeah. I love it. All right. What is your favorite go-to movie?
See, I can always sit down and watch Shawshank Redemption. Don't ask me why. It's just, it's a good movie. Doesn't matter what part of the movie it's on, I can turn it on and sit down and watch it. So,
all right. What is something you can't live without?
my family. That family is my life. And, if I have a rough day at work, my youngest is 5. And so, I know that, I'll be able to come home and she's going to run up and give me a hug or have a smile on her face. Or, obviously my wife is there to support me through everything. And so, family's everything to me.
I love that. Oh, that's awesome. What is something in your ordinary daily life that makes your heart happy?
Well, working with my team, obviously we spend a lot of time at work and a lot of time with each other as teammates and stuff. And so just being able to have those conversations with people, they might be going through a tough time. Maybe they have a family member that's, experiencing an illness or whatever. Just being able to be there, support them, if they need a shoulder to cry on, if they need some support, if they need a resource, whatever it might be, that brings a lot of, value and stuff into those conversations. And so very rewarding conversations.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And what are you grateful for right now?
Having this conversation with you, Rosie, this is, I listen to a lot of podcasts and stuff. And so this is the first one for me to be in here and, be a part of it on this side of it. And so I appreciate the introduction and having the invitation here to sit down and chat with you today.
I love it. We get to be your inaugural podcast.
That's right.
That's fantastic. Right. Well, I love it. All right. I have one final closing question. Jeff, if you could challenge leaders everywhere to practice this one behavior that would create more human workplaces and equip everyone to show up as a leader, what would that be?
Be authentic. Get out there and be yourself. Be true to yourself. Be yourself. Be authentic. However you want to phrase it. Just get out there and have conversations with your team. Don't hide behind your desk or an email. Those types of things. Get out there and talk to your folks. You'll learn a lot.
Well put. Well, Jeff, thank you for modeling authenticity, and thank you for letting us be your inaugural podcast show and for this conversation. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Rosie. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
I'm Rosie Ward, and this is Show Up as a Leader. To learn more, head over to peopleforwardnetwork.com and, of course, hit that follow button.